Hey guys, this is Curtis with Grand Patina, and I'm sitting here with my good friend Murray Ash, who is a vintage newbie in vintage watches. And I thought we'd go over kind of the things that you should look for when buying your first vintage watch, what vintage watches you should get into, GMT, Submariners, Datejust, etc. Kind of different entry points, and as well as kind of talk about what your lifestyle looks like and how certain watches lend itself to traveling or swimming, surfing, etc. You want to add anything I missed here?
I think you covered it, really. That's all I do.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I think most people that think of the vintage Rolex, they think of a GMT or Submariner, and that's a fair entry point for a lot of people that come into this hobby. Is am I looking for something that is a little bit more colorful bezel, like a Pepsi bezel or a Coke bezel, or do you want something a little bit more subdued, like a Submariner?
I think one of my questions is what's a good piece that's going to go with everything? Can I wear it with different outfits, use it for different events? Like when I'm riding my motorcycle, like you said, going to the beach, or if I'm working, like what's a kind of all over good piece, and then maybe more of a dress piece, like for different occasions, right?
I think most sport Rolexes are versatile enough where you can pair it with anything, as like a suit or jeans, or even if you're taking something surfing, I don't think you'll necessarily have to think twice about taking one of these neo vintage pieces into the water, so long as all the seals and everything's pressure checked. I think anything that we're going to go over today is going to lend itself to the majority of your outfits and your pieces. I know you're an active motorcyclist as well as a surfer. So let's start with the classic GMT for now. We have two 16710s. And this is a really cool transitionary piece for Rolex. This is the one you're holding is a Coke bezel, and the one here is a transitional Luminova Pepsi bezel. So during this reference range, Rolex transitioned from using a compound called tritium, which is the luminescent material that is applied onto the little dots, and transitioning it to a Luminova dial. And the difference being is that the half-life of tritium is about 12 and a half years, so it loses its energy every 12 and a half years by half. So you'll see that this does not glow anymore. It's one of the small characteristics of vintage pieces is this tritium that you get in the mid-90s and earlier. Whereas you have a Luminova dial, and this one does glow. And obviously we're using a UV black light, but it will still glow under certain lighting conditions. Both of these watches, I would say they are in that $9,000 to $12,000 range. And sometimes you can find them for more, sometimes you can find them for less, depending on the condition, right? Tritium dials tend to age and patina a little bit more than the Luminova. The Luminova is going to be stark white. If you like that kind of vintage patina, you're going to want to gravitate towards a tritium dial. The variable here is that not all tritium dials age at the same rate, in the sense that some will be darker, some will be lighter, and there's not really an exact science that measures or determines how a dial changes, depending on UV or moisture, etc. So you're going to look, if you're looking at a tritium GMT, you're going to find all different types of, very bright white all the way to very, very deep yellows. Of these two, is there one that you kind of gravitate towards?
Yeah, I think I kind of like this.
The Coke one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the other things that people will notice is that if you look at the hands on the watch and then you look at the dial, they don't necessarily match completely 100%. And that's normal because a lot of these vintage pieces, the point which they manufacture the hands and apply the luminescence on the back of the hands, as well as the dial, could be at very different times. Mm-hmm. And it could be using different compounds or mixtures of tritium. So they don't always have to match, and almost the rule of it is that it's typically not going to match. On the Luminova dials, they're going to be white on white pretty much. There's not much patina or change of character in the way that it visually looks. So that's one of the first things I look at is, does it look visually appealing? right? So that's on the GMT side. And I think I know what you are gravitating towards. You want something a little bit more color. You don't like the blue and red or the Pepsi as much. But let's get into the Submariners, because I know that you have an active lifestyle in surfing as well. And sometimes even if you're like jumping in the pool or washing dishes, whatever, you don't want to necessarily always think about, oh, is this watch going to be waterproof or water safe? Even on the GMT side, as long as the watch is taken care of and serviced, and the O-rings and gaskets are taken care of and lubricated, there is going to be a possibility that they will be waterproof for most active lifestyles. And we do have a really, really rare reference, which is the 168000 versus the 16800. And both of these watches look very, very different, but they're also in a similar pricing category of $9,500 to $12,000. So very similar to the 16710s. But on the Submariner side, what you don't have is that 24-hour hand. But what we do have is kind of a more robustness when it comes to waterproofness than your GMTs. And this is a 16800, and it's the precursor to the transitional 16800. Now, these watches, although they may sound very similar, there's a small difference between the two. They both use the same movement, but the difference being is that the 000 is actually using a newer steel that the 16610 watch that came after the 000 uses. So this is kind of a hybrid of the two generations.
So this is one better because it's got one more zero.
More zeros are better.
Yeah.
It's more lucky.
Okay, cool. That
Okay,
makes sense.
I'm glad you got that. Both these watches are very similar in the way that they wear, but obviously the 16800 has a little bit more colorful insert that's faded over time. It's faded into this kind of creamy brown color, whereas on the 000, the dial of it is a little bit more brown. So it's kind of like the kind of polar opposites of each other.
So one of my questions on this would be, I actually, I like all of these watches, and a part of my decision making would actually involve holding value, potential for increasing value.
Sure.
So is there any difference in maybe getting something a little bit more basic because it's going to be easier for resale, or is that going to not increase in value potentially as much because it's not as rare? Like, what are the differences there?
I think there's a lot of misconception out there that rarity dictates price, right? I think the way I've collected in the past and the way I've been kind of taught is that you really should value the overall aesthetic of the watch and not just the rarity. For example, this 16800 is a really rare reference. It was only made for 1 or 2 years. And the reason being is because it was a transitional piece before Rolex transitioned to the 16610. The 16800, although less rare, this one comes with full provenance box and papers, right? There's a huge debate on the value of a complete set, having something that is the original warranty, the original box, etc. And it just really depends on who you ultimately decide to sell to. There are certain clients out there and people searching for these vintage watches that only want to buy complete sets. Then there's other people like me where if I have $10,000 to spend, I don't want to buy an $8,000 watch and pay a premium of $2,000 for a box and papers. I'd rather spend as much of my hard-earned money on the watch itself. If it happens to come with box and papers, that's just the cherry on top. That's the way I look at it. Now, in terms of what is going to be retaining its value, I think between the two of these, it's very hard because you have a piece that is a complete set. It's got a tropical insert. This one is a tropical dial. But the key differentiator between these two to me is when I look at these watches, I look at the aesthetic of the pieces, what jumps out at me. And that's something that's it's almost intangible because it varies from person to person, right? But the second thing to me is I look at the case. And if you look at both of these cases, they're both very strong. Both of them are very thick. The crown guards are thick and even. But what I notice on the 000 is that if you look at the bevels, they appear unpolished. And when I say, what I mean by that is they haven't been repolished and made shinier, right? So if you look at the lugs of this, you'll notice that the edges are a little bit softer than on the 000, which is, you still see that sharp bevel to it. And that's the original bevel that comes from the factory. So to me, I'd opt for the 000, but that's just me. And to certain people, a full set box of papers with the type of patina that this one has developed, it could be more interesting and could be more valuable to them. So it really depends on who your audience is going to be, and that's really hard to determine at a point such as now, right? Between the four, is there one that you gravitate more towards?
Boom, right here.
The 000. You want to try it on?
Sure.
To roll that over, yep, double clasp it. It seems like a good size. What you'll notice on the Submariner though is that sometimes it may feel chunky, but that's a 40 millimeter watch, much like a lot of the newer Submariners are also 40 millimeters. But on the newer and modern subs, you'll notice that it's a lot taller, it's a lot chunkier. The lugs and case are much bigger, even though it's the same 40 millimeter maximum diameter.
Right. Yeah, that seems to sit pretty well. It's like not too high. I like it.
Cool. So let's go over some other pieces that kind of go past the $10,000 range and kind of give you different options as well.